right, good morning, folks. Welcome to this week's webinar with XBM. This morning, we're going to be talking about Atlassian cloud migration for the next hour. And Atlassian cloud migration is a very big subject that is happening in the Atlassian ecosystem right now. So we have a lot to cover here in this short 1 hour period. So we are going to try to get through everything. My name is Steve Terrelmus. I am a consultant here at XBM. I am also joined by another consultant, Jason Kidner, who's been doing a number of these cloud migrations over the last several months. Jason, why don't you say hi to everybody just so we can make sure your microphone's working?
Yeah, hi, good to be with you.
Excellent. All right, yeah, we have a lot to cover. So if you haven't heard, Atlassian is going through a lot of different cloud migration activity. We work directly with Atlassian, and some of their fiscal budgeting this year really focused on three major areas. One was a continuation of Atlassian cloud migration. The other two are going to be around their scaled tools, Jira Align, and also around Jira Service Management, which is their new, their expanded service management tool. We actually have other webinars that we have done and will do in the future around those other two. But today we're going to talk about the cloud migration. So lots to cover here. Let's jump right in. So let me get to my presentation. Here we go. Okay, so Atlassian announced back in November that they are going to be deprecating their server platform and moving everybody to the cloud environment that is on server or to the data center. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but I just want to quickly show you a timeline that we use roughly when working with customers on about how much time it's going to take to move you onto cloud. And I've also overlaid that timeline on top of Atlassian's deprecation timeline, so you can kind of see what's happening there. So first of all, October 16th, they make the announcement that they're deprecating server. Atlassian has three platforms: server, data center, and cloud. Server and data center are on-prem platforms. Cloud is an Atlassian cloud platform. They make the announcement October 16th. Next year, or I'm sorry, just a few days ago, February 2nd, is when they ended new sales of server, which means you cannot buy any more server products from Atlassian right now if you've never had or you don't have a server product. Next February, 12 months from now, they're going to end upgrades and downgrades on existing server platforms, meaning you can't increase your users or decrease your users. A year after that, on February 2nd of 23, they're going to end the new sale of any apps for server. So if you're out in the ecosystem buying applications for your server instance, you will no longer be able to buy those on February of 23. And then finally, on February 2nd of 2024, they are going to end support. At that point in time, Atlassian is going to completely deprecate the server platform. And the only thing you'll be able to do is maintain your existing server platform. You will not be able to upgrade it or get any kind of support on that. And Atlassian will no longer support it either. Across the top, you're going to see some numbers. These numbers roughly, and I'm going to say very roughly, I'm going to throw this caveat out there, are roughly going to identify your user count and what XBM's estimate is of how long it will take you to migrate from cloud based on that user count. So if you're about 100 or 300 users, you're probably looking at maybe a month or two migration. Once you get past 300 users up to 600 or 1,000, you're probably starting to see a timeline that's in the neighborhood of 8 to 12 months. Anything over 1,000, I would definitely give yourselves about 12 months or more. This can be less. We have migrated people with 5,000 users in less than 12 months. But I'm going to tell you, when we're migrating to cloud, there's a lot of factors that we have to keep in mind. For instance, how many add-ons do you have and what kinds of add-ons are those? In those add-ons, what kind of work have you done? Is there a lot of different detailed custom work that you've done in those add-ons? That can have a big impact on how smoothly you migrate to cloud. You may need to deprecate some of those add-ons. You may need to adjust how you use some of those add-ons. Automation and scripting. Server has the opportunity to basically, what I call, hack into the system and completely rescript some of the foundational platform and tool functionality. If you've done any kind of things like that, some people like to get a little hacky with it, you're going to have a lot of problems with that carrying over. In that case, you may want to consider a greenfield migration. Third-party integrations. How are you tying your current server Jira instance or server Confluence instance into third-party integrations? Not apps, but actual independent third-party integrations with direct tie-ins between those two tools. As you migrate to cloud, those integrations are going to need to be reviewed and tested. Some of them may not work as well. Some of them may need to be redone. And then multiple instances. How many instances do you have? If you've got 5 or 10 instances, moving over to cloud is going to take a little bit more time. It's also going to introduce the conversation around whether or not there's value in federating those instances on an enterprise cloud platform. We're going to talk all about that later on as well. But this is our snapshot, right? This is our quick gotcha in the beginning of the webinar that gives you a good understanding of what you may be up against, what you might need to think of as far as Atlassian's timelines and as far as the actual timelines related to the migration timeline itself. I do actually also want to share with you guys really quickly. Let me pull this up here. Yes, this link right here. This is Atlassian's link on their acceleration or journey to the cloud, and there's good information in here around this. Jason is going to post this link out into the chat where you guys can pull it up and review it if you want to. But if you're considering a migration to cloud, XPM is going to be somebody that can walk that migration with you and help you with everything you need. But this Atlassian information will give you a little bit of stuff to think about. All right, let's keep going. So when we think about journey to cloud, we have to consider the fact that Atlassian has several major platforms out there. Of course, Jira Software is their benchmark platform. Along with that is Jira Core, which is an older platform that a lot of people don't use anymore. Jira Service Desk is a version of Jira Software that has a lot more stuff on it. And then you have Bitbucket, Bamboo, and Crowd, as well as all the Atlassian Marketplace apps. So FYI, all of these are going to be moving to cloud. Bamboo Data Center is going to be available soon. Currently, Bamboo is only available on server and cloud. It's not available on data center yet. So it is going to be available soon if your journey requires you to stay on prem and you want to go from server to data center. Down here, Fisheye and Crucible are there. They are basically going to remain on maintenance mode. Not a lot of people are using these tools anymore. And just to give you a personal opinion, I expect that these will eventually be removed out of scope and eventually deprecated as products. All right, let me keep going. Okay, cloud migration. Let's talk a little bit about platforms. First of all, what are we experiencing here with this cloud migration? Why is this happening? Well, there's a number of reasons why it's happening. Some of them are relevant to Atlassian. Some of them are relevant to the industry as a whole. So if you've been involved in the software industry at all over the last 15 years, you've obviously seen the migration to what we call cloud or SaaS, software as a service platforms. So that does continue to happen. And this is part of the response to the industry moving to SaaS. SaaS can be a simpler product to use. Obviously, it's less cost around the system standpoint. And so the industry is moving that direction, and Atlassian is following that. Also, when it comes to industry standards around subscriptions and licensing, many industry standards are now moving off of the old buy software to a subscription service. So if you remember, and now I'm dating myself a bit, you go back 15, 20 years and you bought Microsoft Office, you got a disc in the mail or from your store, and you would load that disk into your computer. And that meant you had that version of Microsoft Office for as long as it worked, and I think I used my student version of Microsoft Office for about 15 years after I graduated. But that's shifting, right? It's now shifting to subscription services. And so most software platforms are now on a monthly subscription service where you pay a certain amount of money every month or a certain amount of money every year. And so part of this cloud migration is part of that as well. Now, I will say that there is a alternate track, which is the on-prem track for data center if you are not ready to move to cloud migration. Cloud is not for everyone, and Atlassian is still growing some of the robust elements around their cloud platform. The data center migration is going to be the option for you to basically move from server to data center. Let me just explain what that means real quick. When we think about platforms, the first thing to think about is, where does this software live? It always lives on a server somewhere. somewhere, right? So if you're thinking about what we call on-prem, that means that that software is living either on a server in your closet, or it's living in a server that you are renting from a hosted service like Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure, right? But the point is that you are controlling the system side of that platform. You are not only managing the product as like a Jira admin, you are also managing the server setup, which means that you are tying directly into the server structure, whether it's in one of your closets or on a hosted platform like AWS. You still hold and manage that VPN or that cloud, right? The platforms or the tools that Jira has for those right now are Server and Data Center. Server, of course, is being deprecated, so your option is moving to Data Center. One of the big benefits of Data Center is you do have the opportunity for multi servers and a load balancer, which provides better uptime, and it also provides better stability and things like that. There is some information on Atlassian out here around that. Jason, if you wouldn't mind putting that work management link into the chat as well. You can review a little bit more about data center and what's different between data center and server. However, if you are ready to make the shift off of self-managed on-prem services with your product, then you are ready to move to what we call the cloud. And what I call the cloud here is not like a hosted platform like AWS. This is a cloud like you are giving Atlassian the system admin features for the product management entirely. It's almost like when you go to your Gmail. You don't go into your Gmail and start managing the platform, right? Google does that for you. Or when you log onto your bank account, right? There's a lot of product features in your bank account you may manage, but your bank has a different company that manages the platform itself. This is what we mean when we say cloud with Atlassian. I want to clarify that because the word cloud is used in a lot of different ways sometimes. So cloud. So that's going to mean that you're going to have a subscription, either a monthly or an annual subscription with the cloud. When we think about the cloud subscription, it is not only a choice of monthly versus annual, but it is also a choice of tiers. There are a lot of tier activity that's happening now in cloud. Again, this is industry standard. If you go to almost any software product right now, you're going to find that there are different tiers. Across the Atlassian cloud platform, there are primarily 4 tiers. Jason is going to be posting a link in the chat right now that gives you a reference point to the Atlassian cloud pricing tiers for one of their products, Jira. But let me just quickly mention how it works. You have 4 tiers. The first one is free. It's a highly limited, fairly well locked down kind of test type tier that you can use, or if you want to use it in your personal life, which I use Jira and Confluence for managing some of my personal stuff. That's really great for that. That's free. Standard is going to be the step up. That's going to be if you're really looking to get involved in Jira on a business standpoint, but you don't need some more of the advanced features. After standard is going to be premium. Premium is going to give you the ability to do a lot more planning in Jira. It's going to give you the ability to have a free sandbox or dev environment in Jira or Confluence, and it's just going to give you a lot more opportunities there. And then sitting on top of premium is the enterprise platform. Think of enterprise platform as not so much an advancement in product features as much as it is in security and user provisioning. So if you have an enterprise platform or multi-instance platform, or if you have a lot of high security needs, enterprise is the tier for you. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this presentation. Finally, the cloud sandbox. One of the things that has prevented or has been a hurdle for some people in moving to cloud is that when you are on server or data center, you have the option to spin up a free dev instance that you can park on your server, right? In cloud, because it's cloud, you can't just create a separate instance. That actually becomes its own second cloud instance. So for years, if you wanted a sandbox on cloud, you actually had to buy a sandbox and figure out a way to keep your user count down or whatever. That option is still available to you. If you have a low user count and you want to just build a second sandbox instance, you can do that. But the other option that's available now is with premium and enterprise tier, you do get a free dev instance that comes with that as well. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break in our webinar here to tell you a little bit about who we are. You guys have been listening to me for the last few minutes, and you're probably thinking, "Who is XBM, and what is their relationship with Atlassian?" Well, if you've been involved in the Atlassian ecosystem at all for the last several years, you probably know that it's a fairly large company. We're talking about 200,000 companies around the world that use Atlassian products and millions of users. So it is very robust. It's been around for about 20 years. They have probably about 10 different products and over 3,000 add-ons in their marketplace. One of the things Atlassian does that's fairly unique is they have a active partner program. Now, most software companies have partners, but one of the things Atlassian does is they depend almost exclusively on their partners for all consulting and marketing. So if you reach out to Atlassian and say, "Hey, we want to buy your product," or "We have some questions," or "We want to migrate to cloud," almost all the time they will route you directly to a partner. There are about 500 partners right now in the world, and the partners are actually tiered as well. The highest level tier is platinum. In order to be a platinum partner, you have to have a certain number of customers as well as have a certain number of consultants in your organization that have been fully certified by Atlassian. Expium is one of these Atlassian partners. We are a platinum solutions partner in the US. We are one of about 20 platinum solution partners in the US. So it's pretty thin up here at the top. And we are, because we're a platinum solutions partner, we can basically help you with anything you need with your Atlassian ecosystem. One of the things we do a lot is training. We probably do 30 or 40 training classes a year. We will train on any Atlassian product. Our training is business-based, best practices based, workshop based training. If you come to one of our classes, you are not going to see a bunch of slides. You are going to be in the tool. You're going to be doing workshops. Our probably most popular training class is our Jira Bootcamp class, which is a 3-day hands-on workshop based Jira admin training class. We do a lot of training though. I'll show you later on in the webinar how to get access to our training options that are coming up in the future. Consulting. We do consulting on anything you need regarding Atlassian. That can be ideas around governance, can be ideas around best practices, it can be ideas around improving your instance, cleaning up your instance, or migrating to cloud or anything like that. Custom development, we will do any kind of custom activity that you need to do. Atlassian has, Expium has a sister partner by the name of Oasis Digital that is a full stack software development partner, and they actually will and have built multiple custom tools for our customers. Everything between custom scripting within the tool into direct third-party interface custom work, also and portals, building portals that sit on top of Jira so your users don't even see Jira. Everything they see is a portal that feeds into Jira. So custom development is something we can do as well. Finally, lastly is licensing. You can license directly with Atlassian, but I would strongly recommend you work with a partner to do it. Partners can provide licensing to you at the same price, no additional cost to you as doing it directly with Atlassian. And often, depending on how you're growing and the products you have and how big you are, partners can even usually get you a better rate. But that's not even the best part of licensing with a partner. When you license with a partner, you are directly connected throughout the term of your license with that partner. If you are licensing directly with Atlassian, every time you reach out to them, you're talking to somebody different. If you license with XBM, you're talking to me, or you're talking to Jason, or you're talking to one of our consultants. And so you always have a direct tie. That helps not only with you, with us being able to help you figure out maybe what consulting you might need or training you might need. It also helps you figure out what licensing you need. You can ask us questions about what add-ons are best. You can ask us questions about what's happening with licensing down the road, what changes are coming out, how we can help you manage your licensing. Okay, that's a quick splash in the pond about Expium. We can help you out with anything you need. Jason, if you wouldn't mind putting our just Expium's URL out there, expium.com in the chat. If folks want to connect with us, they can do that. At the end of this webinar, I'm going to give you my email address too, and you can connect directly with me or with Jason. All right, let's keep going. Cloud migrations benefit plus. So what this slide is going to talk about is the fact that when you migrate to the cloud, not only are you shifting your platform, there are also a number of things that are going to come alongside that are going to make your Atlassian experience better, improved, more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to talk about some of those. First of all, licensing improvements. When you migrate to the cloud, there are a lot of options like consolidating licenses. If you've built multiple different licenses out there, you can consolidate them. There's different tiers, like I mentioned before. You get additional products when you migrate to the cloud, like advanced roadmaps and things like that. You also have opportunity for better user provisioning. So there are a lot of things that you can do with licensing as you migrate to the cloud that may be cheaper and better for you. Obviously, we can help you navigate those questions and do that cost analysis for you. Also, reduced maintenance costs. So, for example, if you're moving to the cloud, you no longer need to pay for the hardware of the servers, right? You no longer need to pay as much money for the server, for the employees at your company that are managing the server itself, right? So, all of these are cost savings that are going to happening when you move to the cloud. Also, server, if you've been in server or data center, you know that there are scheduled updates that come out that require possible downtime on your system while you run through that update, as well as analysis. On the cloud, you actually have automated updates happening all the time. Atlassian's cloud instance is being reviewed and updated almost on a weekly basis, fixing bugs, coming out with new features, and things like that. By and large, most of those features are not features that are going to break anything or cause any major disruption to you. So don't worry about that. But it is oftentimes just little tweaks and improvements that they do. Occasionally, they do come out with some big updates, and usually there's an announcement that on that. But reduced maintenance cost is going to be a big thing that you're going to be able to save on. System and database cleanup. So a lot of times, if you have been in an Atlassian product for a while, like Jira, and you have several admins that are living in that product, you probably have a database that's an absolute mess. It probably has thousands and thousands of schemes out there, many of which are duplicitous, many of which are no longer needed. When you do a migration to cloud, it is a great opportunity to tack onto that migration a system and database cleanup. How you do that kind of depends on how you're going to migrate from server or data center to the cloud, right? Depending on your migration strategy, the system and database cleanup will align with that. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on at the end of this presentation when we talk about what your options are for migrating to the cloud. Governance implementation. What kind of governance do you currently have in your instance? XPM actually has a governance webinar that we do about every month or so. I just did one last week. It's out there on YouTube if you want to see it on our YouTube channel. By the way, this is a great time too, Jason, if you wouldn't mind putting a link in the chat to XPM's YouTube channel. We have a ton of videos out there, short, quick how-to videos, as well as lengthy videos on a lot of different things that we've done. But governance is the idea of how are we managing the tool so that we can prepare ourselves well for scalable growth, open knowledge sharing, and things like that. How many admins do you have in the instance? And is that the right number of admins for the number of users and the number of instances you have? All of these concepts around governance we get into in other webinars, but I want to point out here that a migration to the cloud is the best time to really focus on that governance. In fact, if you're going to migrate to the cloud, you're probably going to need to have some sort of steering committee or control committee or governance committee just for the cloud migration. So it's a great opportunity to use that committee to start with a governance implementation as well. And again, if you need any help with that, we can certainly help you with that. How about realigning on value streams? So one of the things we're seeing in the industry, especially around teamwork, is this idea of scaling along teams, building out your functional structure around where your value points are as a company. So things about, what are your teams out there? Not just like your Scrum teams or your Agile teams, but what are your portfolio teams that are out there that are working on your key core competencies as a company? Looking at a cloud migration is a great opportunity to think about how should we realign along those value streams. As you migrate, you may find that a development team is actually getting work feeding from multiple different projects in Jira. Well, maybe it's time to start thinking about building the project itself around the team. So these are all theoretical concepts that are out in the marketplace around things like agile and scaling transformation and digital transformation and all that great stuff. I'm not even going to come close to getting into that in this webinar, but we actually do have other webinars that we do where we talk about that. But this is a great time to consider that. We're moving to cloud. Why not think about reevaluating your value streams? We're working with a customer right now that's doing a 2,000 user cloud migration. Would you believe it? That product is leading the effort for them to become a scaled transformation enterprise. Just the migration of the cloud has opened up the need for them to scale and to work in team and to build things along value streams, which is then adjusting how they're managing their structure in their tools, which is then leading them to a scale migration. So it's kind of funny to see a cloud migration show that, develop that, and really start motivating that internally. But that's exactly what we're seeing happen with this customer. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how some of these changes are going to come across in the things that you're going to need to think about as you're looking at the cloud, the differences between the cloud and server data center and things like that. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason, who has been working on a number of cloud migrations for us. And I did this myself on the last webinar, but I invited Jason to do it this time because he's got so much fresh information on what's been happening out there in the ecosystem with these migrations. So Jason, why don't you go ahead and take it away from there?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Steve. So yeah, there are plenty of differences to consider as you migrate potentially from server to cloud. The first one is marketplace apps. This is a major part of the discovery work and the migration work we're doing with all of the clients that we're working with for migration. So most of you are aware that Atlassian has a really rich ecosystem. Part of that is that there's thousands of marketplace apps, so lots of different vendors that they're working with. And we're seeing with this cloud migration, this journey to the cloud, that there is a rapidly changing marketplace, around these cloud migration opportunities. So we're seeing a lot of marketplace vendors starting to consolidate, some of the bigger ones gobbling up the smaller ones. We're also seeing Atlassian acquiring a number of add-ons, and like automation for Jira that they've packaged into their premium and enterprise tiers, and even standard tiers to some level. They've also acquired Insight that they're starting to package into their JSM offerings in different ways. So we're seeing a lot of shifting happen in the marketplace. And one thing to note, this is the big call out with the migration, is not all apps exist on server and data center and cloud. Some exist on server, but they're not on cloud. Some are on data center, but they're not on server. So there's a real need for discovery around this. And then even those that do exist, those apps that do exist on the server data center and also on cloud, they're going to be different. There's going to be a lot of minor, but maybe some major differences, because the underlying Atlassian code that whether it's server or cloud is quite a bit different. So those apps have to work with those differences, and they're going to have different features and UIs and things like that. Just to give you a little taste of what this means, like with an app migration, Steve, if you could share our one server instance, this playground instance that we have that has many server add-ons in it. If you could highlight.
Let me bring that over here.
Let's see. Yeah, there. Let's see. Where is it?
Did we lose it?
Where did it go? It looks
all right,
like it might be
keep
on
talking.
a different tab.
Keep talking. I'm gonna pull it up.
Okay, yeah. So this is going to be a little teaser into the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant. It's an add-on that Atlassian has provided, that they're even doing many improvements on to help aid the migration from server to cloud. So here we go. This is one of our oh, there it is. Is it over there? There we go.
Yeah, I have to log back in because they kill you after a while, but it's down here.
Yeah, down here under, yeah. Just scroll up slightly. Yeah, there it is, Migrate to Cloud. So this is an add-on. It's a free add-on that Atlassian's offering. And again, we're using this with clients. We're seeing they are making improvements. There's a need for a lot more improvements, especially around add-ons. So if you click on the Assess and Install Apps, this just highlights a lot of the considerations just very quickly. Again, we have a lot of add-ons in this instance. And as you scroll down, Steve, you all can see that it notes that the add-on, it notes if you go to the top, if you can see the headers, you can very quickly see, does this add-on exist in the cloud? Yes or no? Can it be migrated? Okay, some, yeah, there is a straightforward pathway. Some you need to contact the vendor. So what we're finding here, and this is one of the major parts of, and one of the things that extends out the migrations is some of these apps do not have a very straightforward migration path, if they even have one to begin with. And we're having to do a lot of work internally and with vendors to try to figure out ways to migrate well. So, and sometimes you just need to go, this doesn't exist, or it's just not going to migrate well. And you need to look for another app that's on the cloud and pivot to some other app potentially. So this is definitely a major difference. If we go back to the slide deck, another one is just cloud feature updates. And there's just some other kind of miscellaneous challenges to consider as you're going to cloud. One is your server or data center instance may have a lot of customizations. Again, using some of the add-ons like Script Runner or maybe just some completely customized solutions that won't shift directly to cloud. And so if you do have a really customized instance, that's going to be a major consideration. Some of that may not transfer, and you have to potentially redo all that customization in the cloud. So that's one call out. Another call out is in the cloud issue navigator, when you're doing filtering, if you have more than 1,000 issues that appear in those filter results, you are limited in the cloud to exporting up to 1,000 rows from the issue navigator. So again, something just to be mindful of as you're going to cloud. Another thing to note is, again, when you're going to cloud, you are relying on Atlassian to manage and to host the products. And depending on which tier you're on, right now, out of the box with a standard or a premium tier, you're relying upon Atlassian to host that. And the data residency for that could be spread out around the world in various AWS centers that Atlassian is using. In order to get to actually control where your data is managed, whether that's Europe or North America, or at the growing list of data residency areas, you actually have to go to enterprise at the moment. But we are finding that Atlassian, that's a pain point for a lot of customers, and Atlassian's looking into ways to provide data residency at lower tier levels. But again, something to consider around data residency. And lastly, just a call out that if you're migrating Confluence from server or data center to cloud, you do have to consider that there is a new Confluence editor in the cloud, and a number of the macros in the editor are either deprecated or they're just different. A couple of examples of this are the anchor macro, the insert macro, and then we're also seeing too that some of the cloud macros, some of the code content macros are different, and some customers we're finding are struggling with showing rendering those code macros well in the cloud. So again, these are just a few anecdotal things that we're finding with customers, but there's a number of differences to be clear. Next is user management. So for this, we'll just kind of give you a really quick demo, or not really demo, but just show you into the cloud user interface for user management. So if we go to one of our XPM playgrounds.
Which one do you want to start on?
Yeah, let's go to the user. Yeah, here we go. So if you click on the users, Steve, in the left-hand menu, just to show you the list of users. So what we see here is it's a very different UI from the server or data center user management. In server and data center, your user management is really at the product level. You're going into one product, either Confluence or Jira, let's say, and you're managing your users for them. In cloud, what you have is you have basically a layer of user management that is on top of any of the cloud products that your organization has licenses for. So out here, you're really managing the users and their product access, their group access across all of your cloud products for a given organization that you have set up. So, and one thing that to call out here, as we see just in this list of users on a demo site, when you migrate your users and groups in from server data center into cloud, what happens is a brand new Atlassian Cloud ID, user ID gets created. And that user, let's say in this case, like Brendan here, Brendan might have been known as like by a username in server data center. Now Brendan is known by his email address. So what happens is these unique email addresses create a unique Atlassian user ID in the cloud. So Brendan, with that email address, wherever he goes with any Atlassian cloud product, he will be able to log in on 10 different Jira instances in the cloud with that one Atlassian cloud account. So users are really tied in with a particular email address going forward with the cloud. And if we go back to the user list, actually just stay here, Steve, go back into Brendan's. And you can see here that that from, again, one different place, you can control what product access a given user has. So in this case, we have 3 different products. You could just, toggle them on and off per user at this higher level. So there's some really nice features. It's just, but it is a big difference from server and data center. Another thing to note here is that, and we're not really going to talk about this too much, but when you go, most of our clients, when they go to the cloud, they've already previously had some sort of SSO strategy, or they're doing user provisioning using an Active Directory, and that can all be set up within the cloud as well. And to do that, Atlassian has a product called Atlassian Access, and that's a separate product from Jira or Confluence. And what that does is you purchase separate licenses for that, and that layers on top again of all these products. It layers really out here at the organization level, and it allows you to do single sign-on for your users. It allows you to do user provisioning of your users and of groups, so that the Active Directory, your users and groups can be managed from the Active Directory. So that is all very possible. We're doing that with most of our migration clients. Steve, if you could go to the groups, we'll just down below users. Yep. So you can also note here that a number of these groups out of the box with Atlassian Cloud are going to be slightly different. A number of these groups come by default. And if you scroll down, Steve, you can note that there's a site admin group. That's a really important group to give the ability to come out to this user management area. There's a number of considerations, again, when you're shifting of how to then do the product access and other permissioning using these groups. So this is a big, there's a number of differences here. And again, this is, again, going to be organization-wide. I think the final thing to just note around this is if you go back to users, I failed to mention this with the users section. If you click on Brendan, and scroll down, notice that this is a new thing with cloud. For each user, you have the ability to choose a different role for them. And you have 3 choices. You have basic, which again, just gives kind of basic access to your products. There's a trusted role, which allows the user to be able to do some admin settings, to even add new add-ons, and to do some limited inviting of new users. And then you have your site administration, which gives access to administer the products and to do billing and user management. So these are some new things, features that they've added into cloud. These can work really well for organizations starting with the cloud straight away. They might not fit in so well with your current setup with using groups and managing them from Active Directories, but we can certainly navigate all this with you with your migration. So I think, let's see, those are some of the major things I wanted to highlight. There's some other things, but for now, I think we won't go any more deep dive into this, and we can move on to some other differences that Steve is going to talk to you about.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, there's a lot of things there. What we found is that cloud migration is almost as much about users as it is about product. And so there's even changes that are coming out now around user provisioning and organizational admin role, which is above the product and things like that. So it's really important to work with a partner like XPM to keep on top of those changes as they're coming out, especially if you're considering a cloud migration. But there are definitely some product changes that are happening too. So the cloud and the server or data center product actually are somewhat managed by different groups over at Atlassian. And so over the last few years, they do have a tendency to kind of evolve differently sometimes. As a result, sometimes the product itself may have some differences between what you may be used to in server or data center versus cloud. So I just want to point out a few key differences that are there. The first major difference is going to be with Jira on the what we call the view screen. Now, this is a very specific difference, but it's well worth pointing out. If you look at a view screen of a cloud instance, if you've been on server or data center, you will notice that when you're viewing a particular issue on a screen, this looks a lot different than it does on server or data center. Now, this kind of just this one quick look kind of makes you might think that cloud is vastly different than data center and server. It really isn't. Like if you're an admin in Jira, the things are still going to be the same. The way you build out a project is still the same. All the places where you go to build those out is going to be the same. But this one thing has changed a lot. So your fields are now kind of listed over here on the right-hand side. And then you've got some kind of like content-based fields over here in the middle. So that's vastly different than the view that you saw before. Also, because of this change, if you know anything about screens on an issue in Jira, you always have three screens. You have the create screen, you have the edit screen, and you have the view screen. Because of this change, the view screen and the edit screen are basically being combined into one here. So there are some differences. We often recommend on a cloud migration that you might want to earmark a little bit of time for your users to have some basic cloud user migration training that you can do. I mean, we do it here at XPM, and it's typically anywhere between 2 to 4 hours to train people. So that's something to keep in mind there as well. Also, there are just some other features that exist on cloud that you may not have seen on server because they have just been added or are not out there right now. Next gen projects is the ability for an individual user to build a small project. We do a lot of best practices around next gen projects, and in general, XPM does not recommend you depend very heavily on these. But it is a nice feature if you have a user that needs to build a quick project with some simple work that they need to do, and they don't want to bother the admin with building the project. The next gen project might be a good solution for that. Jira Automation is a product that actually used to be an add-on in the marketplace that Atlassian purchased, brought into the product, and now in the cloud instance, under the system settings, you can actually build automation tools for projects. And there's a lot of neat stuff you can do with that. But that's definitely a new tool. It's actually something that greatly facilitates and enhances maybe what you might be used to and what we like to call advanced roadmap features like conditions and validators and post functions. This is another kind of separate way of doing that, and there's some really nice features with that as well. Advanced roadmaps and roadmaps. So on the cloud, you have the ability to create roadmaps for your projects, and have the ability to create advanced roadmaps. Now, advanced roadmaps is a product that you only get with premium and enterprise tier. It's not available on free or standard, but it is a fantastic tool for organizing teams or small groups of teams in looking forward and projecting out how the work you're doing is impacting the timeline, the future timeline of that team, and how the dependencies across the different teams are going to have an impact on their work. This here is also a great stepping stool if you are going to eventually move into a scaled business transformation. Atlassian has a large scaled tool called Jira Align that they use for that. Advanced roadmaps are a great introduction into that tool. So that's out there as well, and a really nice feature. Okay, we are now about 15 minutes to the end of the webinar. So I'm going to start wrapping up with some last slides, and then we're going to have time at the end for a couple of questions if you have some questions. So I want to take a few minutes and talk about roadmap. And what I mean by this is, what is your trajectory? What is your plan for migrating to cloud? And more importantly, what is the strategy that is best for you in that migration? So there's a couple of different ways to do this. One way we call it is what's called kind of like a lift and shift. This is the idea of, we are just going to export our database and import it into cloud. This can be this can be done successfully for some people, depending on where you are and how simple you are. It's usually recommended for small instances. It's not necessarily recommended for instances that are heavily dependent on apps. And it's not recommended for instances that are behind on versions. Remember, your cloud instance, your cloud platform doesn't have versioning. It's always up to date. Your server data center platform has versioning. So if you're way behind on your versions, a lift and shift is probably not going to work really well. It's also not recommended if you've got custom coding in your instance. There's two ways of doing a lift and shift. If you're small enough, maybe just a one-time lift and shift would work perfectly fine. If you're a little bit larger, you might want to do some variations of lift and shift. Like, we're going to give it a try, see what breaks, we're going to fix what breaks, then we're going to run it again, and then we're going to set up a crossover time period, like maybe over a weekend, once we've solved all the problems we've seen with our test shifts and things like that. So that's one way you can do that. Depending on how big you are and the different things you have, this can take, a couple of weeks up to 6 to 12 months. Jira Cloud migration apps. Okay, so there is a application that Atlassian has built. It's new. It's actually a nice application. It's not perfect yet. They are improving it. And it is an application that is going to allow you to do some different tests and runs, and actually move things over, like project by project and things like that. So there's a lot of nice features to that Jira Cloud migration app. I would recommend you don't I would recommend you work with a partner when you're doing that. It's just that the app keeps changing a lot, and also there's a lot of features. Don't forget the migration to cloud. A big element of that is user management, and there are a lot of features around user provisioning that have been changing. So you want to be careful with that. Okay, manual migration, or even a greenfield start over migration. This is actually a lot less scary than you might think. Oftentimes, when people are working in Jira, they are working on time-based projects, which are eventually going to archive. It's not a bad idea to actually just start over again. In fact, it's in business in general, it's a good idea to periodically step back and take a look at your processes and your platforms, and see whether or not you want to redo them or iterate on them. The manual or the greenfield migration allows you to basically start from scratch, doing it right this time, right? We've had Jira for 5 years, or we've had it for 10 years, and it's an absolute mess. Well, what would you do different? How would you build it now if you had the opportunity to build it from scratch, knowing what you know now? That's what the greenfield migration can do for you. And it's really powerful. It can help really make things a lot more efficient, and actually bring to light some of the best practices around how you structure your product, as well as how you're structuring your work and your teams. And then what you do is, over on the old platform, server or data center, you just eventually start ending projects as the end. Eventually, the majority of those projects will end. You archive those projects, you reduce the user count, and you preserve the instance out there with a small user count, so there's a very low cost to you. That's a very viable option to think about. There's a lot of things that need to be considered with that, like what are some of the best practices? Do our people know how to build projects the right way? Do we need to go through training first? There's lots of things that need to be considered there, but that can be a very powerful and successful migration strategy. Intentional team migration. This is the idea of, we're going to migrating. Everybody's a mess, but this team over here is in really good shape. So we're going to use them as our maverick, as our front runner. We're going to put them out there. We're going to migrate them. We're going to clean everything up through them. And then they're going to be the shining light on the hill that everybody else is going to attain to over the next 6 months or so, as we migrate team by team by team. This is a nice way to kind of take a big group of users and break it down into a digestible chunk, while figuring out what problems you're going to run into, and solve that on a small team first, and then later bring in the larger teams, or bring in more teams as part of a larger migration later on. Okay, all of these are going to have different timelines, and the timelines are really going to be impacted on what you need to do, some of the some of the different strategies you're going to do, and things like that. So Jason's been working with a lot of customers on these migrations, so he's going to take some time now and just kind of demonstrate to you some of the things that we look at when we talk to customers about a cloud migration. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Jason.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Yeah, this is kind of, we're wrapping up here. But if you could share that one window with
Sorry, wrong one. This one.
our dashboard. Yeah, we can just use this as
That
a,
one, or which? This one.
yeah, let's start with the migration dashboard. So if you can scroll down just to note the engagement steps. There we go. This is, again, a really high level of thinking through, like, what would it mean to engage with us? Probably really in terms of helping with the migration from server data center to cloud. And Steve noted that in that first slide, really, that there's a lot of considerations around this. You might have a really small instance that 100 or less users, really straightforward configuration, maybe hardly any add-ons at all. That could be done in a matter of weeks, 1 to 2 weeks potentially, if it's really straightforward. It could go up to 1 to 2 months. Again, if it's a little more complicated, it might have an app or two that we need you need to think through the considerations for. It could go all the way up to a year potentially if you have up to 5,000 users, lots of different configurations, third-party integrations, things like that. So there's a lot of things to think about depending on your app's use, your customization and automation, again, third-party integrations, just the amount of projects and the complexity of your instance to begin with. So, but we'd like to walk through with clients, really a major discovery phase, the initial phase, which can, as we say, kind of estimated duration. These are all estimates, like potentially, a month or more for discovery. If there's a lot of add-ons that need to be discovered, how can we do this migration for these add-ons? What do you need? Choices you might need to make. Then we typically go into some pre-testing migrations. So just making sure that we're in a good place to try to a test migration, UAT planning, just align on the strategy of what it would look like to do your migration, if it's going to be a small lift and shift over a weekend or a multi-week, multi-project sort of migration. Then we'll work with doing at least one test migration, if not more test migrations, to make sure that we have a really smooth process that's going to work well, and to understand how long this is all going to take to iterate on that and to learn as we go along. There's obviously UAT involved to make sure that everything's being caught in a migration to cloud. And then there's the planning, the pre-prod migration, just getting things ready for that migration, doing the migration, and then obviously a lot of probably cleanup work, a lot of other things maybe related to some of your add-ons that can be done after the migration is done. So this again can spread out from a matter of weeks to a matter of months to almost a year, depending on how complicated things are. So we like to use Atlassian tools when we're working with clients, like you can see here with this Confluence page. Steve, just one last thing to show, if you go to the migration runbook tab, you can just highlight that we use Pages when we collaborate with our clients, and we have a lot of great templates set up that we can work with you on to collaborate on. You can click the prod migration. You can see we have tables that we have set up, again, to work to collaborate with a nice step-by-step process that will meet your exact needs. So we've done, we're working with a lot of clients. We've had a lot of experience. We've learned a ton over the past year with these migrations, and we have close ties again with Atlassian to see where they're headed, where they're making improvements, and we can absolutely help any of you with any of your migration needs.
Great. All right, thanks, Jason. Hey, I'm going to wrap up this webinar here just by giving you guys a quick slide with some of our upcoming webinars. Here's a QR code you can access to get to our events page where you can actually register for all of these. This is my email address. This is Jason's email address. Before we wrap up today, are there any questions out there? There's a Q&A section in the Zoom. If you have any questions, feel free to put them out there. And we can answer just a couple of questions here in the last few minutes before we wrap up. Okay, I see one question out there around enterprise. The question is, can you tell us a little bit more about the enterprise cloud tier and what are some of the things there? That's a really good question. Let me just first of all share this link with you guys real quick. This is Atlassian's link on enterprise. It's got some great information out there. I'm going to put this into the chat for us so that you guys can you can access that if you want to. Um, XPM actually did Atlassian's first enterprise cloud migration. And so we've actually been working very closely with Atlassian on the enterprise tier. One of the great things, there's two really good things about the enterprise tier. One is that for large organizations, large user counts, you can provision your users all together in one place. It brings you a lot more user provisioning control into your Atlassian process. Also, you can federate instances. So you can provision your users across multiple instances without having to blend all those instances together. They can actually still be separate instances. So that's one of the great things about the enterprise tier. It's a very valuable tier. It comes with a lot of extra added benefits as well, including some advanced Atlassian support if you want that as well. Jason, I don't know if you have any other comments on the enterprise tier.
Well, the only other thing to say is that's the tier right now that you can control where your data resides. So Atlassian again's thinking about offering that in other ways because a lot of customers, that's a major pain point for a lot of customers. But that you have to go to enterprise to get that data residency control.
Yeah, especially if you're looking at security. Oh, the one other really nice feature of enterprise is it is one license count, regardless of how many instances you have. So if you have somebody in your Atlassian ecosystem that lives in 10 different instances, right now they're being charged 10 times, once for each instance. When you roll them into the enterprise, even though the 10 instances remain, that user only gets charged for one enterprise license. So that's a really nice feature. Also, any users that are in the enterprise tier get access free. It's a fantastic product that Atlassian uses for user provisioning, and that comes free with the enterprise tier for those products, platforms, and users that are on the enterprise tier. So, yeah, I would strongly recommend you consider the enterprise platform if you are a large organization. Otherwise, premium tends to be where most people are going to when they migrate to the cloud. That not only gives you all the great features of Jira, it also gives you all the planning features like the advanced roadmaps, the free sandbox, and things like that. So, any other questions before we wrap up today? Well, great. Well, I appreciate everybody taking the time to walk through this webinar with us today and explore the journey of your cloud migration. Again, we are out here. We can help you out with anything you need in the Atlassian ecosystem. So do not hesitate to reach out to us and let us help you. Otherwise, I hope you guys have your safe and happy journey through the Atlassian ecosystem, and we will see you out there.